Whoa.
Oh, I know. It's official now. Hello. Welcome back to my
Hi.
channel. This is Holly Hughes. I'm an intuitive and an author, and I am speaking with an old friend, Noam Raucher. So, Noam, take it away. Introduce yourself. Who are you going to be today?
Oh man, that's I'm Noam Raucher. I'm in Pasadena, California. I'm a single dad to two beautiful boys. And I'm an educator, a rabbi, and a spiritual and divorce coach for people who are, obviously going through major life transitions.
Yeah. And this is the cool thing for anyone watching. I met you like 10 years ago.
Yeah. When I was serving as a pulpit rabbi over in Charlotte, North Carolina. Those are the
Yeah.
days.
Those were the days back in the day. And then you moved back to California, LA. I had moved from
Yeah.
LA to Charlotte. And the really interesting
Yeah.
thing is that here we are like 5, 6 years later, and we're both out in the world helping people through a really traumatic and emotionally charged time in their lives. And part of the reason why I do it is I had some pretty rough relationships when I was younger. I call it, I had a defective picker, but it really wasn't about
Mm,
my picker. I was very conditioned
mm,
to love broken people.
mm,
And so it took healing me to realize I was hiding and helping and hiding and healing, and that I was making myself smaller in situations to make other people feel better. Which might seem weird if anyone knew me back in the day because I was thriving in LA and I had a big
mm,
personality. But being at work and in control at work is very different
mm,
than managing a private life and
mm.
intimate relationships. Um, and so I really like being able to support people through that change to rediscover themselves. Now, what made you decide to help people?
Well, so admittedly, I don't think a lot of that was clear when I first went into it. A friend suggested I should go into divorce coaching. I didn't even really know it was a thing. So I'm grateful for the suggestion. And it's been a wonderful rabbit hole to go down. I mean, just being a rabbi, right? There's a lot of training in pastoral care and being with people at really delicate moments of their life, particularly in major life transitions, very different from divorce, but also equally powerful, where they are different on the other side of it. And so, wanting to add that as a particular skill set um, felt as a really good use of time, particularly during the pandemic, right? When there was nothing else going on and I wanted to do some learning, this felt useful on any number of levels. So I went with it. And it also did help me kind of see my own divorce from different perspectives, network in the community, and also process my own, personal divorce experience too, and give words and a voice to that. And so there was a part of me that was intuitive about it and said, like, this will be really helpful for you, but didn't really flesh out entirely what it was about. And I think particularly coming from a spiritual background and upbringing and, way of offering myself in the world, I see it as, really being very close to the hero's journey, which is a theme that
Mm,
comes up in the Torah as well, when you talk about Jacob and being on the run, and the transition that he goes through and his own ordeal, or wrestling match that he goes through. And so, that for me became a really helpful vehicle in articulating what I think we all go through, every single one of us, regardless of what the divorce process is like. But every single one of us, what we go through when we go through divorce, which is to say that the hero's journey involves three stages: the departure, right, the leaving of something familiar, call that married life or family life or whatever context you've created for yourself, because now divorce has opened the door to that leaving and you don't have really a choice about it. And then you cross over into like this grand ordeal, right, this abyss, a place that's really unfamiliar where you're challenged. And the idea is, if you're really engaged in it, as you should be, right, trying to get out of it, fight for your own survival in that way, then you will have come out changed. You'll come out in Jacob's story with a limp, right, after wrestling this mysterious person in the middle of the night, right? Talk about a dark, deep space, an abyss-like space. And so, and then you return, right? And you return being different. In popular culture, right, male characters will often come back with a beard. Um,
weird.
right, it's also very much in, in the movie The Devil Wears Prada, right? Or in the story, The Devil Wears Prada, forget about the movie, but you know, how she transitions herself into becoming this real fashionista who's very much hip and with it, right?
Mhm.
And now that she's left it, right, she's stronger for it. She's a different person than she was when she first got in.
Well, speaking as a writer, when you speak hero's journey, I'm like, it's my language.
Right.
Speaking writing is like my love language. I often tell people, you are not who you were when you decided to get married, and you're no longer the person who you were in the marriage.
There you
In the
go.
process of divorce, you really do have to get ready for that bumpy ride,
There
and
you
you
go.
have to make choices, and you also have to forgive yourself. A lot of forgiveness for yourself. And then you get to decide, I say, after a year of crazy, who you want to be after. Because I really think that the year after a divorce is a pivotal time to explore and express everything that you didn't do that maybe you wanted to do when you were married, or
Yep.
sometimes you're catching up on the emotional development for many people who get married earlier in their 20s and who are divorcing in their, let's say, 30s or 40s or later. You know, who was I? What did I give up?
Right.
What could have that been? So I like to give people space and breath and all the grace they need for the year of crazy, especially if they're still maintaining work and taking care of their families, whatever. You can let loose a little. And I think many people just don't give themselves a break.
Letting loose is a huge part of it. I think there are a lot of people that take that seriously and some people who don't. And some people simply don't have the time, but it's crucial, right? This It's a creative time, right? You've now been liberated. We go back to that Passover idea. You've now been liberated from something, and you know this is an opportunity to experiment because you're in the wilderness,
Mm,
right? It's boundless. You're enabled to do that. You're supposed to grow. And I think also, you know, all the things that you're talking about point to the idea of making the experience meaningful, right? Rather than just being a grief-stricken or
mhm,
mournful time, and it's okay to do that. You should mourn the loss of something that you know you were part of, and something that meant something to you. And at the same time, you've got to turn that into something meaningful, right? And this is all Viktor Frankl stuff, right? People who
mhm.
survived really terrible conditions is because they found a way to make meaning out of it. And if you can make meaning, I would think, out of the Holocaust and being inside of a concentration
Seriously.
camp, you can make meaning out of your divorce, right? And that should also just kind of put you on a proportional scale of how upset you should get over these things. Um, but to each their own. But the larger point is to say the extent by which you get through it, I think, is a measurement of how much meaning you really put into it.
Yeah, and I am a big believer of like feel your feelings. I often say I'm really moody, and I'm moody because I give myself permission to feel what I'm feeling.
Right.
I'm in a crappy mood today, or I'm really silly today, or I'm
Yep.
whatever. And I let everyone around me know
Right.
that it's also not their responsibility to fix it for me, make it better, unless I ask you for a hug because I need some affection or something. But that I own all those things that a long time ago, I didn't even understand what emotions I had because I didn't let myself feel anything. I was like really good at that, right? I was like, oh no, this person is the angry person. I would never be angry, never
Right.
be angry. And then in therapy one day, I was like, and she's like, what's up? I was like, what is this? And she's like, give me words. I'm like,
Hmm.
no words. And I was just like a hot, snotty mess. And she's like, you're angry. I'm like, this is what anger is. And she's
Oh
like,
wow.
that's what anger is. And I was like,
Yeah.
and then I went to Santa Monica Pier, and I had this thing about crying in public during my
Yeah.
divorce. And so like I went to the
Like
pier.
you try too often? Is that what you're trying
No,
to
like
say?
I wanted to be alone, but not isolated.
I hear you. Okay.
So, right.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
wasn't actually on the pier. I was like on the pathway above,
Yeah.
like up over there. And I just cried for hours, like until my body was done. And then I was like, anger, it doesn't really have to be destructive,
Right.
right? It can be a tool
Right.
in setting a boundary, and it's not bad. So the things that I thought were bad emotions, especially during a divorce, I learned, oh, I get to set a new boundary. I can stick up for myself.
Mm,
Oh, during my divorce, I finally understood to only meet him in public places where he could not harm me,
mm. Smart
which
move.
for me was just so like how am I that girl?
I'm
And
sure
just
anger was part of that.
yeah, For sure, for
Right.
sure. So yeah, that's super interesting. I'm wondering if you like
Yeah.
have a tip that you like give to people who are in a place in their relationship where they both know they're going to get divorced, but like how do you begin? Like how do you say it out loud, or how do you tell the kids, or what is it like after that first, like we know it's over and now?
Well, I mean, the first thing I think about in your scenario is that, it seems really mutual on both sides, right? That like they've come to some understanding, even if they haven't spoken about it, that like they should be divorced.
Mhm.
That doesn't really happen in a lot of scenarios, right? Many divorces, 70% of them are initiated by women. And so there are a lot of men who are just kind of caught off guard by it. But, nonetheless, if it were a scenario where it seemed like both parties were mutually or at least individually aware of this, even if they hadn't shared it, and seemed like they could approach it together as friends or in a friendly way, right? Then you start with love, right? And you say, I love you, but something needs to change here, right? And I don't think it's our marriage that's moving forward, right? And whatever other words you want to use, I think, to fill in the idea that the marriage needs to end and that you need to move on with different phases of your life, and for whatever reasons these are necessary. I think the clearer you can be about it, right, with the right people, the better your chances are of really being understood. Right. Like if someone came to me, if I was married to someone and she all of a sudden she realized she was gay and she's like, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
Right. I'm gay. Right. I would understand that. I'd be like, well, I think that kind of sucks.
Nice.
And right. And I would try to be friends with her, I imagine, um, and I'd probably also be angry at some point because I'd be like, "What do you mean you didn't know that?" Right? I mean, I think it's fair to experience all the emotions involved. My point is to say that, like, the more which you can explain yourself to someone, right, the better chances you are of being understood.
I don't think I ever knew that 70% of divorces are initiated by the women.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me. I'm gonna have to think about that one. Do you, is the your experience of that, because you counsel a majority of men, right? So I'm counseling a majority of women,
Hmm.
typically men before they're married, but women towards the end come to me. Um, and it's always some sort of infidelity
Hmm.
that they perhaps have forgiven
Hmm.
and then repeats. And then they feel foolish, or we have a family. And typically the man is like, oh, well, like, they're like, because the women are like, I know that I taught him to treat me like this, that I said it was okay or whatever. So they wrestle with that idea. But what about like infidelity in a relationship and then separating from there with less like maybe rage?
I'm not sure what the question is really.
Meaning, like, what would you say, like, maybe I'm asking for the man's perspective on knowing that I love my wife, but I also at a place where I'm don't want to be in the marriage, but I feel guilty for leaving. How about something like that? That seems like a pretty normal place to be in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth exploring why the guilt matters, right? Why that's so prevalent. Maybe that's got to do with the kids. Maybe you think that she's not going to be in a good financial position. You don't want to leave her that way. There could be any number of reasons why someone feels guilty about it, but wanting to explore that. And nonetheless, right, wanting to weigh that against is what I imagine would be a very real need and want to get divorced in the first place. And I think I wonder about that. I wonder how many guys consider divorce and give it a second or third or fourth look, just because they feel guilty about a lot of things versus how women end up doing it. I know that, women end up spending about 2 to 3 years thinking about divorce before they actually go and execute on it.
Mm.
So I'm just curious to know about what that statistic is for men involved in the picture. Um, I would imagine again that if his need and desire to want to be divorced outweighed his sense of guilt, right? If one of those was more important to really address, right? And if it was the divorce one, then I would encourage him in that direction, right? Or at least I would say, right, that's something you need to give extra thought to because right? It's you're putting it up against something that's, important, but also, in comparison, not that important.
Okay.
Sorry,
And then,
I'm getting knocks at the door. Give me one
okay.
second. Are you okay with
Sure.
that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Okay. I have a final question for you.
Yeah.
The
Can
expression.
I also just say I didn't really like my answer to your last question
You can
because
re-answer it.
the door was being knocked on and I got
Okay.
totally like distracted by it.
Well, I'll just cut it out.
Okay,
Okay.
I
Okay.
appreciate that.
This, of course. I'm here to make everyone feel comfortable. Skip your scratches. Did you actually get fleas?
No, I didn't get fleas.
Okay. I don't know if you have pets. It's not that uncommon.
No, it's this is the first time I'm wearing these long socks, so it's a little itchy. It was cold
Okay.
this morning. I like nice and warm.
I'm totally okay with that. Okay, so this is the question of the
Yeah.
day. Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, I get to practice editing. Okay. The question is for you, for your divorce, what is the thing that you learned about yourself that surprised you the most?
The thing I learned about myself that surprised me the most was probably how much perspective taking I could do on something like this, and how I could articulate about it and make it into a really useful experience. I would never have imagined that going into it. It's become a wonderful, like I said, opportunity for me to find voice and articulate myself. And in that way, it's inspired other creative endeavors too. I had a podcast going before my Jewish divorce podcast, and when the Jewish divorce podcast picked up, and I was feeling really energized about it, I went back to that previous podcast. I just kind of left it there. And because I said like, oh, I can do something with this now. And then I thought of another podcast to do, and then another one. And granted, like podcasting is obviously turning into a passion project for me, right? And I may need to stop it at just some point because I wonder if anyone's really listening. But to know that like something could be done with the experience that would help other people and bring not only meaning to my life but potentially meaning to other people's lives, became something that was evident as I was getting deeper into the process. And I had no idea I was going to be able to do that, or that was even an option when I was first going through the divorce.
But did
But
you have an, that's like you're really good at like mentally sorting things. And I'm really curious because you help people through such an emotional space. And I know you have
yeah,
all of your training, right? Like as a rabbi and everything else as a coach to kind of keep it in the mental space. But I'm really curious about your point of emotional expansion or change because of your divorce. Like, do you know what that is for you?
oh sure, yeah. Look, I wrestle with anger, and that became a big question as to whether or not I let anger get the best of me in my marriage. And I'm pretty sure that was an ugly part of me that my ex didn't like seeing. And then also, wrestling with the idea of the shame and guilt that comes with anger. And there's a vicious cycle that a lot of people go through. They experience anger, then they feel shame or guilt for
Mhm.
experiencing anger, and then there's more anger because of the shame and guilt. So it's a really nasty cycle. And um, I came to a place where I was like, look, anger is a total natural emotion. Even if people say that it evolved within us as a way of defending ourselves and surviving, okay, fine. So it evolved later on, but nonetheless, it's still part of us.
Mhm.
And it's not like it's going anywhere. And frankly, any number of the emotions could be toxic to one's self, right, and to other people if left unchecked, right? I think that's the whole point, right? Too much joy is, in some ways, spiritual bypass, right? You're telling me
Mhm.
that you experience no lows, right? There's no sadness in your life,
Right.
right? Disgust, and you never leave your house. Fear, same thing, right? You develop phobias about things. Anger, it gets the better of you, and you end up burning up from it, right? Sadness, we know what that looks like. That's depression. So experiencing, the full palette of natural emotions that I think we all have, right, and recognizing that you're supposed to experience all of them, and that they can all be useful in their own individual way, and sometimes collectively if you can channel them in the right way. Um, Coming to that realization for myself in this whole process was incredibly useful in coming to terms with my anger and realizing that I need to know when it comes up in my body. I need to know the things that really trigger me, right? And I need to find the right places to end up expressing that anger, because I'm not going to bury it down. That wouldn't be helpful.
Right.
Right? And so going through that evolution emotionally, and that realization and that growth in this whole process was huge for me. And it's been a wonderful way for me to parent too, just in terms of how I remind the kids about experiencing their own emotions.
That's cool. I have a favorite tip I tell people when they're really pissed off and it's just like it's overwhelming their body, right? You're just full of rage. Either walk away. I'm a big fan of walking away. Hey, I need to walk away. I need to
Yeah.
go for a walk around the block. You can always
Right.
ask for that space. But one of the more ridiculous things, and I know it's ridiculous, but it really works. You get the biggest pillow in your house. Every woman has a Euro pillow. Every woman has a giant square pillow, right?
Right.
And I typically like to go to the guest bedroom, like if you have that in your house, or you go to the back of your least favorite sofa, because I don't want the energy of this to be anywhere like you hang out. And then you lift that fucking pillow over your head and you smash the bed over and over and you scream and you cry and you get it out. I had my daughter record me once and the pillow biffed me back in the face,
Oh
knocked
yeah.
my glasses off, and then I started cracking up. But it is such a physical relief that the mental spin of it really it can't exist in the same space as smashing a pillow. So I like people look at me, they're like, it's just so simple. I'm like, it is, and that's the beauty of it. And
Well,
try it. It works. It
and
works.
for people like us who might be very much in touch with their anger and capable of expressing it and knowing where to put it so it doesn't harm other people
Mm,
around us, think of all those other people who have difficulty accessing their anger and wouldn't know the idea of why are you screaming into a pillow in the first place. Like for them, they don't even get that angry, which like boggles my mind.
that was me for like 30 years. I was like, oh no, I won't. My stomach
Yeah,
is upset for no
so
reason. I don't
weird.
know why my stomach is so upset.
I mean, in the men's circles, sometimes there'll be a guy who wants to work on their anger, and like sometimes just asking them to yell is like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I yell? Why would I raise my voice? And so, really tapping into it is a very difficult thing for a lot of people. And I commend people who don't anger easily. I really do, and who can channel their anger in really healthy ways.
I don't know that I'm
I think
always
it's a
healthy. I
beautiful
think it's a
thing.
tricky one, but I do.
It's hugely tricky.
I'm a big proponent of really owning that one. And not vilifying it so much because it's happening for a reason. There's a pain. There's such a grief. There's such a pain in there that the only way it knows how to come out is through that. I'll call it a tantrum when it's not really under control, right? So anyway, thanks for talking to me today. It was so
My
good to
pleasure.
see you.
Good to
And
see you as well.
where can people find you if they want to talk to you?
You can find me on Instagram and on Facebook at Noam Raucher, NoamRaucher. And check out my podcast on divorce. It's called The Jewish Divorce Project. It's on Spotify. And reach out if you have any questions about what you're going through in divorce. If you're a man, if you're a woman, however you identify,
Nice.
whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.